here's Chris Baer, host of FFM93 Live.
All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome back here to episode 16 of FFM93 Live. We are underway here, and a lot of things have kind of been happening in the last couple of weeks. Just want to tweet this out here, and then we'll bring in the guest, Bill Meltzer, here for today's show. Again, the Flyers pick up a win last night in Ottawa. Again, solid win, honestly, but let me just tweet this out, and then we'll bring in Bill. Again, here he is now, Bill Meltzer from Philadelphia NHL.com, NHL.com. Bill, thanks for doing this. Always appreciate it. Always good to talk to you. How you doing?
Always a pleasure, Chris. I'm doing well, thanks. Busy sports weekend here. Coming down a little bit from it, not in a good way, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
The thing is there's still a lot to look forward to. The Eagles, a lot of Flyer season to go, so let's get right into it.
Right, no, for sure, I hear you. And look, I know you're big into baseball, so let's start off with that for a minute or two. That's unfortunate. I mean, I know we both talk hockey and we both do other things, but I know you're big into baseball. I'm pretty big into baseball too. It sucks. I mean, that was. It felt like after Game 3, and me and you were just talking about this before. It felt like they had a chance to win that. Kind of unfortunate. I don't know if anybody would compare it to 93 for somebody like you that saw it. But for me, again, we were just talking about this, that it's more of, we've never really seen this, and most of what Phillies baseball was for like 10 years or so was just going out and having a good night. So it's unfortunate, but what did you kind of take away from it?
Yeah, well, I mean, the run was unbelievable. The ride was a whole lot of fun,
Yeah.
To me, it shows, first of all, you get in the playoffs and anything can happen, and that's not just baseball. That's really any sport.
Right.
That's why there's I know you hear this in hockey sometimes, or certainly heard it in Philly around the Phillies. What's the use of sneaking in? You're going to lose in the first round anyway, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you never know in a playoff series, And I've seen that pretty much all my life. I've seen some huge upsets in playoff series, and I mean this Phillies run was amazing. I mean, the value of making the playoffs was the experience of beating St. Louis, beating Atlanta, beating San Diego, winning the pennant. It sucks losing in the World Series. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But to actually take that ride, have the run, win a pennant, and get as far as they did, the ultimate team to me, the team that I just love the most in all of sports, was the 86-87 Flyers. I mean, I just love that team.
Mm-hmm.
And they lost in 7 games to Edmonton. And years later, yes, it would have been, I guess, even that much more special had they won the Stanley Cup. I don't think I could have been any prouder of that team had they won, right?
Yeah.
And that run with the Phillies in 93, where they'd lost 97 games the year before that, and then then everything came together that one year, and everybody picked Atlanta to beat. Atlanta's going to take them out in 4. Atlanta's going to take them out in 5. Lo and behold, the Phillies beat Atlanta, and they win that series, and you get to the World Series, and I mean the killer from that series was that they blew. What was it? Game 4 in Philly, and they had a big lead. They had like an 8-run lead, and they blew that game. You lose that one, then Schilling is unbelievable in Game 5. Game 6, you're leading going into the 9th inning. You have your closer out there, and you think, okay, a pretty good chance we're going to go 7 here. Same thing with the Phillies this year. It's like, you feel pretty good with Wheeler out there. You take a lead, and you're thinking, you know what, we got a shot at this. We got a shot at taking this to a Game 7, and then boom, and it's gone. So So I think you go through those experiences. You learn to put them in some perspective.
Right.
It's always going to suck to a degree.
Right.
But as some months, and especially as years go by, you remember the good a lot more than how it ended.
For sure. I mean, look, everybody's going to pick apart every little thing from Hoskins to Castellanos to, Thompson pulling Wheeler, every little thing, but in general, there was a lot of good moments in that from not just like, and it wasn't just Harper or Romuto or anybody. It was everybody. And that was the biggest thing. I mean, once they got in, when Rob Thompson said, 13, we need 13 more games, that felt different to me. It wasn't just like, oh, that like cliche kind of thing, but kind of getting back to hockey a little bit and kind of what we do on the daily basis. Flyers, they played last night. They win last night 2-1 over Ottawa. To me, Bill, I kind of saw this one as a probably one of the most consistent games that they've played all year, from period to period at least. I kind of felt like, in some games, and head coach John Tortorella talked about this a lot, was, he didn't like the start, or the second period wasn't good, or this, that, and the other. And it felt like this game where it was like, obviously you're not going to dominate all 60 minutes. That's nearly impossible in hockey. But when you have moments like that, and for the Flyers, it felt like, I think the one thing that I've noticed the most was they're able to create so many plays below the goal line. And I think that's one of their strengths for this year. Would you agree with that? And kind of going off that tour, is there anything that you've kind of noticed through 11 games so far that's at least better than last year up until now?
Sure. Well, I mean, let's start with this, right? They gave up the first goal. The first 5 minutes were terrible.
They were horrible.
I mean, Giroux had a great scoring chance 29 seconds into the game, and then 2 minutes into the game, he gets his 300th goal. Yeah. And shots are 6-0, etc. It's like, oh man. And then this is, A, the tendency towards bad starts and whatever, but B, last year the Flyers only won 5 games the entire season when they were scored on first. They've already won 5 games. Yeah. So the resiliency factor. It's such a it's such a noticeable difference now. Nobody's even saying, oh, they gave the first goal and they bounced back, because they've been doing that, and that's definitely a big positive that you see this season, and to the point where we're not even talking about that now. So that's definitely a positive. Structurally, I think they've done, they haven't been perfect by any means, but I think structurally they've done a pretty good job of keeping play to the outside enough, or boxing out enough where Hart can at least see the puck.
Right.
And that's because if the goalie's facing backdoor plays and deflections all game long, I don't care what goalie it is, Shesterkin, Vasilevsky, Hart, whoever it is, you do that for long enough, and eventually, A, some are going to go in, but B, it's going to drag the goaltending down with it, particularly those backdoor plays, because then what happens is the goalie starts cheating off the post, knowing there's a pretty good chance of they're going to work a backdoor play, and then all of a sudden something sneaks into the short side. Bad goal, yeah, but the problem is you have to be alert to so many possibilities because your team's prone to giving them up. So I think that the Flyers in those areas have been better. They block a ton of shots, 29 more shot blocks. Last game here, so that's a positive. And the power play is definitely better.
100%,
yeah, especially PP1. PP2 looks better in practice. There are days in practice where PP2 looks better than PP1. Biggest thing is getting the entries.
Yeah.
If they can improve on entries or move somebody to that unit where they can get some entries, then I think you start seeing some goals from the second unit too. But I would say those are the biggest things, and I think the PK to a lesser extent. The only other thing I'll say about the PK though is that people forget that at the Christmas break last year, the PK was at 82%, and then the bottom dropped out of as bad as it went as bad as everything else on the team did. But they've always had kind of the wherewithal to be a better PK team, and I think, but just given what a mess it was in the second half, even being in the middle of the pack is another improvement. So I think those have been the positives.
No, for sure. I mean, I actually wrote about the penalty, the power play the other day, about how it's clearly better. And I think part of the problem with the second unit, like you kind of hinted on too, was by the time the first unit's done, there's like a minute to a minute, maybe like 30 seconds to a minute left. And it's basically the one crack at the entry to get in if it's all the way down by Hart. and they've been messing it up. And usually the two guys that have been doing that are Frost and Farabee, and Frost is another guy that I want to hit on too.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, no, for sure, I agree. I mean, I think a lot of things have been better. I mean, just defending the middle, like you mentioned. The lines have been different, pretty much every game. There's been obviously guys sat, but I think one guy that consistently he's played in every game so far and has honestly made an impact. He's scored a couple goals and set up some places. Has actually been Delorier. I personally feel like he's been one of the guys that's been consistently noticeable pretty much every night, regardless if he's with Sedlak or Legzinski or last game with Frost, which is probably their best line in that game, which is kind of ironic on how it is and how we you see Frost in the fourth line and you're like, oh, here we go, but then he ends up actually having a really solid game. But kind of going off on that with Frost, he's obviously hasn't had the greatest start to the season. I don't really think all of it's been his fault, right? I don't really think he's been given much of a chance. You know what I mean? It's been more of you're playing with a guy from Bellows who just gets here and plays an optional practice, which they didn't really do anything. It was just skills, and then McEwen. And the difference between putting a guy with Frost like Cates and Tippett like last year, putting him with a Bellows and McEwen this year, is the problem with McEwen. And this is nothing against Zach, because I like Zach a lot. He's very nice. He's a great guy. But when McEwen gets the puck, he dumps it. When he dumps it, Frost is a rush guy. He can't do anything with the puck because he doesn't have it. It's already in the offensive zone. Yeah, so that's kind of the problem. What have you kind of seen from Frost, and are there any things that you think that they could maybe do a little bit better with him?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, players. You start with players who are responsible for their own play, right? Mm-hmm. And that so any criticisms I have in any other areas, it all starts with if Morgan had a little more production right now. I think that it would be beneficial to him, to be beneficial to the team.
Right.
That being said, we could break it offensively, defensively. We could break it a lot of different ways. But from an offensive standpoint, so he had 2 goals in the first game, right? I thought the second game against Vancouver, he was pretty quiet that game. Played fine, but pretty quiet. Nothing really jumped out. One pretty nondescript game. I actually thought he was good in that game in Tampa Bay. His only other point of the season so far, but he had a really nice entry. It's his only assist. I had a really nice entry in a sequence that ended with the Scott Lawton goal. Mm-hmm. But in that same game, he had a point blank chance on the doorstep and Vasilevsky shot out the pad and he made the save. Yeah. If it's not Vasilevsky, that's probably a goal, right? It was early in the second period. And then, in the third period, you can tell when Frost is confident because he creates things and he breaks certain things out of his repertoire. And in the third period of that game, Frost has this little toe drag and shoot move that he hasn't really used that much in the NHL. Mm-hmm. Well, he pulled it off on Victor Hedman of all guys. And Hedman bit. And if Hedman didn't have that freakish reach to break it up in the last second, that may have been a goal.
Yeah.
So I thought he was really good in that game. The Florida game, I mean, the Flyers as a team weren't all that good, but Frost did have a breakaway right after Florida retook the lead in the third period.
Yeah.
Florida scored a breakaway and Frost had a breakaway right after that. And I mean, at least he put it on the net. It probably wasn't the best breakaway you'll ever see. He was trying to shoot it over the glove and he put it right into the glove.
Right into the glove, yeah.
He didn't even really put it where he wanted to, but still, it's a breakaway. One of the things they're stressing him is use your feet. You don't get a breakaway and you don't get to the net unless you're using your feet.
Exactly.
And then a couple games after that is the San Jose game, the game where they benched Hayes and Konechny in the third period. And in that third period, Frost had another breakaway. And I thought Reimer made a really good save.
Yeah.
And there was another one that was point blank at the net on a power play. And probably his best power play scoring chance so far this year. And it was surely after that, actually, that the Torts said, well, I don't care about chances. You need to score. Well, you need to score, but when you look at some of the underlying stuff, going into the last game here, in Ottawa, he only had 7 offensive zone starts at 5-on-5. So that's not really conducive necessarily to producing a lot of offense.
Yeah.
And the Carolina game, he had not exactly a breakaway, but he got loose over the middle, and he had a good scoring chance there. And you go last night in Ottawa, he almost scored in a wraparound. For a guy they're saying isn't producing anything offensively, at least he's getting chance. At least he's getting some chances.
Yeah.
And I don't want to compare players. Noah Cates is Noah Cates. Morgan Frost is Morgan Frost. And Cates brings you certainly all those details and defensive ability and all the rest of that too. So, but Noah's stuck on 1 point and 5 shots on goal through 11 games, and he's mostly played in the top 6.
And that 1 point is the goal against Tampa in Game 3.
Correct. That was the game-winning goal. And since then, I believe he has maybe 2. I think
2 shots.
1 shot on goal.
Yeah.
Since that time. So, the other thing with Morgan, I talk about the offensive side. On the defensive side, I thought it was interesting because Rocky Thompson, the assistant coach, was a guest on Jason Martinez's Flyers Daily podcast. And Jason didn't really lead Rocky any which way. He simply asked an open-ended question, what are your observations of Morgan? And Rocky said he can use his legs better, that's nothing new. I mean, that's something that Mike Yeo had said, that Ian LaPerriere has said.
That's been years.
And Morgan himself has said it. He got
it in an exit day last year.
Yeah, he said that he's done that. Yeah, moving his feet better. The thing is, you consciously know it, but you had a way that you played junior hockey that you could get away with playing that way, just because he could think the game so much faster and his hands were so good that sometimes you revert to playing that way. So that's why with the breakaway chances and the chances at the net, you have to use your legs to get there.
Yeah.
So I actually think he's making and there's improvement in there. But anyway, the flip side of that equation was after Rocky Thompson talked about Frost using his legs more, he said, I'll tell you one of the positives is I think he's competed pretty well in our zone. Mm-hmm. Right. And he gave an example. He gave an example of the game against San Jose, where he was in a pretty tough matchup with Tomas Hertl, and Frost did a really good job defensively on that game. And he said that he's really treading the right way there. Not 2 days after that, John Tortorella says he doesn't give us anything defensively. And I'm thinking, well, that's a disconnect here. That's 2 different messages. That's one from the assistant coach, one from the head coach, and it can't be both.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only game in between the two was one where he only played about, I don't know, less than 10 minutes. I think he played in that game. Mm-hmm. So I say, well, he couldn't have gone that downhill in 2 days. So I don't know, I think Frost has improved a lot defensively. I mean, listen, he's not going to be Couturier defensively. He's not going to be Dave Poulin defensively, but he doesn't hurt you. He doesn't hurt you. And I thought in the Rangers game and then last game in Ottawa, he actually was better on the defensive side of the puck than the offensive side of the puck.
Yeah.
So I think he has ability to, again, at least be adequate or even a little better than adequate there. I would like to see him try the combination from last year, that where he was with Tippett and where he was with Cates. Now Tippett played last game on the top line and played part of the game before that in Toronto on the top line, so maybe they run with that just a little bit longer and see how Owen does. And they kept Scott Lawton and Cates together for a long time, and Lawton's obviously a key player in the team, and he brings a lot as a two-way guy. But there was no offensive chemistry between the two. I mean,
there is with Lawton and Tippett, but they moved them up, like you mentioned.
Right? Yeah, same thing. So they moved Tippett up, but try it. What can it hurt? What can it hurt to try that line together?
Right.
All they could do is maybe succeed, or and if they don't, okay, then you looked at it and it didn't work out. last year, a couple of times, Frost was moved up to the top power play unit, and he actually produced some points when he was tried up there. Now, right now, I wouldn't touch the top unit. Right now, the top unit is doing fine. I wouldn't mess with it. But just that that's a possibility. You can. What's another way of helping a player who's struggling? And I'm going too far on Frost here, but another way to help a player who's struggling sometimes is, same thing they did with Noah Cates, right? At center, he didn't have a lot of offensive confidence, so they tried him back on a wing. If you're not thrilled with how Frost has been playing in his own end or whatever, off puck, then try him on a wing. It frees him up to leave the zone a little earlier. So
I said that in June. I said start him at wing because the whole, they want him to be a center, and then I feel like when he plays center, everything gets nitpicked. And look, I understand that, right? I mean, you want him to be a certain center, but when you have such a, and again, we've talked about this before, like such a high offensive talent when you see that, right? And it's like, it's not just one time. Like, it's not just like, that was a really nice play. Like, he does this, like when he's confident, he does it over and over and over again. And it's like, I kind of look at it like how they mentioned Ronnie Attard when they said, oh, well, we kind of want to, turn him into like a Chernak type guy. Well, basically what that's doing is taking the offense out of his game, removing it, and then putting it back in later. You can't do that with Frost because he still has that talent. You know what I mean? So it's like, and again, obviously everybody's going to, feel their way about Frost and that, he's not producing because he's not scoring. Well, that's not true. You know what I mean? Like Noah Cates hasn't really done, again, like we mentioned, hasn't done much. And again, I like Noah a lot. He came on the show, all that stuff, and it's something against him. Just offensively, hasn't produced as much to play top six. Now, last game, he started on third line with Sedlak and McEwen. Yeah. And I wonder if they'll keep that together because, again, you still have Bellows. So I don't really know what kind of lines they're going to do for the next game against St. Louis because you have Bellows and then you still have Frost if he plays the 4C. Somebody will have to come out for Bellows. I don't really know who else that will be at the moment.
I don't know. I actually thought Bellows' game in Toronto was his best game of the three. I thought I noticed him in some positive ways in that game. Yeah. The other two games that were nondescript, the first game and the Rangers game, I didn't really notice him one way or another. But I thought in the Toronto game he took a couple positive steps. So they wanted to keep Lazinski in the lineup, and I don't know what they're going to do. Truthfully, as a bigger picture thing here, I first of all, I have to love the way that Konechny is playing. Konechny, I mean, your team MVP is Carter Hart, and certainly Hayes has been racking up assists, but your most consistent forward by far has been Travis Konechny.
100%.
So he's back at his all-star form, even a little bit better. So that's been fantastic, and it's been nice to get some contributions. From down in the lineup a little bit, right? Like Zach McEwen has 3 goals so far. Right?
Yeah,
so that's unexpected. Yeah, you had the game where you even got one from Delorier. Mm-hmm. You need those unexpected contributions sometimes, but the middle 6 in the lineup, you definitely need to figure out what's going on and get some production out of and go. And so they've been winning games on goaltending primarily, of course, and the top line and the power play and some occasional contributions. But I think one thing that's been hidden in a not a positive way necessarily right now is I don't think with even Farabee's been a little up and down, but Farabee at least he missed all the preseason. It takes a little bit of time to really get going, and he's had some good moments, some good games. But he's also already kind of an established NHL player. So even though he's in that 25 and under group, he's almost a little different case just because he has had some success in the league, and so you can kind of bank on a certain amount of it. But I think generally speaking, that group of 25 and under players, they're not playing with a lot of confidence on the whole.
Yeah.
On the blue line, I think that right now Zamula's a little bit lost, for example.
I think Sanheim is too, even though he's older. But
yeah, and Lazinski hasn't been playing very much. He doesn't seem all that confident. I just talked at length about Frost. I think Cates' offensive confidence is really low right now. I want to see, I'm not saying coddled. I mean, players should be held to a standard, whatever. But I do think picking up some of those guys' confidence is important moving forward here. Part of the season, you want to compete and you want to win. You need to find out who are going to be guys who can help contribute over the long run. And it seems like, again, a lot of them are not very confident right now. So that's something that I think that needs to be addressed, truthfully.
For sure. I mean, look, it hasn't been perfect, but they're winning games, and I think the one thing that we can kind of take away is that it's definitely better than last year. I mean, there's many areas that are much better than last year. Bill, there's a couple questions in here. Eric Wisniewski asks, any status on Cam, meaning Cam Atkinson? Is there anything on that, or still out indefinitely?
Yeah, with Cammy and I think it was about a week ago, and I think it was last Saturday. Chuck Fletcher did speak a little bit about it. And it was nothing that happened on the ice. It was something that presented one day and hasn't gone away.
Yeah.
Hasn't gotten better really to any significant degree either. I'm a little, it's strange because he's not on IR. He's stayed on the active roster.
Yeah.
It's very, very odd. I mean, that's how you treat a day-to-day thing, but he's not day-to-day at this point, clearly. He's week to week and he doesn't skate it yet. So, I mean, I've heard it's a little bit behind the scenes what he might be dealing with. Since it's not public information, I'm not going to say it here. But it's but it's something. It's something. It is upper body. It's something he's been dealing with, and it's not something you can really skate or play with. So it's it's definitely a concern. But at any rate, unfortunately the news is that there's no news. He's hopefully we hear an update within the next week or so that he's at least skating again, even on his own, because he hasn't been. I knew it was a concern when all the injured guys took the road trip. Even Couturier at that time was on the road trip before he had the setback, and Cam wasn't with him. So it doesn't sound like it doesn't sound like he's going to come back imminently. I wouldn't think in the next couple of weeks at least.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's unfortunate. Like, I mean, we see, like, I know everybody's been like, oh, well, why is McEwen playing so high? He's playing so high because they don't have anybody. And that's kind of the unfortunate thing is, like, and if there's any guy I would have liked to see kind of help turn this around, it would have been Atkinson because of the heart that he shows and the emotion that he plays with. Bill, one last question here. This one comes from Eric. He says, what's going to be done with the backup goalie? They got 0 points with the backup. And, if you look at Sandstrom, right, and you look at his numbers, and for some reason, I mean, it's got to be one of the craziest goalie stats that I've probably ever seen, but they're 0-7-1 with Sandstrom in net. He doesn't really have bad numbers. He's a 904 save percentage and 343 goals against average for his career. That's across the past 2 seasons, 5 games last year and the 3 this year. And if you remember the games last year, he was never given a chance in really any of the games. Pretty much every goal, somebody was wide open or it was a breakdown or something. This year, the game against Florida, that game was probably winnable. It was, again, like a 5-minute span that kind of opened that one up, and the Panthers took advantage. The game against Toronto, again, that was another winnable game. Very many chances and tight, and really in really the whole second period, they had all those power plays, couldn't score. Came within 1 again, and then Tavares just undressed Sanheim and said goodnight. And then the game against San Jose, that was just a dud. And unfortunately, he hasn't won an NHL game yet. It's unfortunate, but what have you kind of seen from Sandstrom so far? And my dad actually was going to call in and ask about Sandstrom, and he was going to ask, do you think that they basically should have went out and got a vet, or was Sandstrom the better call?
No, I mean, I think that he's, I don't know that a Martin Jones type would have done better so far.
Yeah.
I think Sandstrom's been, he hasn't been superhuman like Carter Hart has so far, but he's been fine. He's kept them in games. You mentioned the Florida game. The Flyers gave up, what was it, 8 2-on-1s / breakaways in that game?
Oh yeah, I think it was. odd man rushes was probably 8 or 9, maybe 3 or 4 breakaways.
Yeah, exactly. And then 2 of them ended up in the net. I mean, I have a hard time blaming a goalie in those. And there was one from the top of a circle that I thought he probably should have had. But other than that, it was a deflected goal, and some breakaways. I can't blame a goalie on that. The San Jose game, maybe one he could have said. They got shut out. You're not gonna.
Yeah.
It's all unless it's a 0-0 tie through 65 minutes, and you win in a shootout. We know Flyers do shootouts, but that's the only way you're gonna. They didn't score a goal for him. So what are you gonna do? And that was the case last year too. Remember, he almost won his debut game, which actually was in San Jose, and that one they scored in the final minute and tied, and then they won in overtime.
Mm-hmm.
But he just stood on his head that whole game.
He was great. 42 saves, I think.
For like 42 saves. Yep, exactly. And he's very athletic.
Yeah.
Has good demeanor for a goalie. He doesn't get too high or too low. I want to see him stay healthy. He's had some injury issues in his career. I think he's healthy now. And the other part of it too is that you want Samuel Ersson playing with the Phantoms,
right?
And Sam's done a pretty good job down there. So, I'm fine with Sandstrom. It is rough that they haven't won one yet with him, but over the course of a season, and I think you judge over a bigger sample size ultimately. But I think he's been fine so far.
Right. No, for sure. I agree. Bill, thanks so much for doing this. Pleasure as always. Always good talking with you. You got anything coming out soon to let anybody know?
I think some people know that I'm working on a book with Joe Watson. And the draft of the book should be done this year, but with the book actually coming out probably in the latter part of 2023. So that keeps me busy on non-game nights, but it's it's all good. You can find my work on PhiladelphiaFlyers.com several days a week and Hockey Buzz as well.
Cool. Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
There he is, everybody. Bill Meltzer from PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, NHL.com, Hockey Buzz, all that stuff. So, again, a lot of good stuff from Bill, as always. And these headphones are killing my ears. But we got a couple things here in the chat. Derek, if you can get a Shesterkin Hart combo that can probably win games with the backup, that's very true. Eric Wisniewski, he hasn't been playing bad, but I feel we need more veteran presence. Could be. They are a little bit, I guess, thin on the vets because, you have more guys that are, again, kind of like what Bill talked about too, like younger, but in that 25, 26 range, and guys that have been in the league for a while, but not as much really like veterans. Again, if anybody wants to call in, call 267-939-1216, and I'll take the call now. Philly Ghost is my opinion. Tony DeAngelo is emerging as the leader and mouthpiece for this team. Agreed. I mean, DeAngelo has been really, really good. But let's review the full week for the Flyers. So we had the Rangers on Tuesday, this past Tuesday. That was not the worst game, probably the least offensive game they've played so far, meaning they didn't really generate many scoring chances. It was kind of unfortunate because, there were some good things in that game, but you had a couple of chances in overtime to score. And, I feel like in general, the power play, I've mentioned that. And I also wanted to mention the blog a little bit and kind of talk about that too. Cause again, I wrote about that on the blog and, basically, what the blog is and what it'll be is basically just, articles and other things and just more content is really what it is. I had that itch for probably since August to actually start writing again. And, look, I mean, everybody knows that the amount of coverage I do on the team and, from the videos and now this podcast and, I just kind of wanted to add something else. So, I add the blog, and it's just a site that it's going to have everything on it. There's going to be articles on there. There's going to be basically, the write-ups for the podcast, write-ups for the videos, basically what that's going to be. And then also, obviously, I'll have legit articles in there as well. Kind of like what I wrote on the power play. It was close to like 1,000-word article. I talked about the things that I liked, and in that I mentioned kind of the different areas and the different guys that have kind of helped. And, I think, look, it's been a mixed unit because of the injuries and because of all the different guys that haven't been playing. You lose Van Riemsdyk with the finger, Lawton gets onto it, Tippett gets hurt in the first game, comes back. Then it was Farabee on that for a little bit. There's been a little bit of a mix of guys that have kind of been on it. And, in general, again, if anybody wants to call in, call 267-939-1216. Just in general, the power play's been good. I mean, if we're looking up, again, I'm going to pull it up now. The stats for the power play, and at least just in general for, what it's actually been for the season. The Flyers right now are 20th power play in the league. They have 8 goals on 40 attempts. That's 20%. So pretty good. I mean, for what last year was, definitely been better. 8 power play goals in 11 games. That's definitely a good thing. As for the penalty kill, the Flyers penalty kill, and it's weird. Fox has it on here as power play kill percentage. The Bruins have the best penalty kill, 92.9%. Flyers have the 10th best penalty kill in the league. They were 14th, and they have only given up 7 power play goals against on 39 opportunities for 82.1%. So pretty good right there, just in general. It was 14th going into last game against Ottawa. Ottawa went 0 for 5 on the power play in that game. Yeah, 0 for 5. Flyers went 5 for 5 on the PK. Really good job just on that alone. And I've talked about the special teams and what's been different. And they've been able to open up the bumper. And I don't really remember the last time that the bumper's been open. If you don't know what the bumper is the slot. And the bumper's been open before. I'm getting a call now from my dad, so let me answer this. Hey, Dad, you're on the air.
What's going on, bud?
What's
Quick
up?
question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, none. Quick question. I'm going to hang up and listen. Just curious. Coots, think he's going to be playing this year or not? Or do you let him just, what are they saying? 3 to 4 months maybe with him?
Mm-hmm.
If you're having, they're playing good now, but what if, that turns and they're not? Do you just put them on the shelf for the rest of the year? Or on the flip side of that, if they're making a run, and who knows, anything can happen. If they're making a run, do you throw him out there and risk him getting hurt again? All right, hanging up.
Okay, thanks.
Good.
Bye. It's always funny how my dad calls in. Yeah, so Coots, I mean, for what it is and where he's at, they said 3 to 4 months. 3 to 4 months was what, 2 weeks ago? What are you looking at? I can't even add. That's got to be like February, March, maybe April. Probably not. At least because, again, 3 to 4 months in Flyers terms is probably 5 to 6. So yeah, probably March. So he's probably not playing this year, which is the unfortunate thing of all this. If they're making a run, there's probably no point, because it's like you're adding an injured guy just to come in for a playoff run. Depending on where you're at, is Coots going to be the actual Coots that he usually is, or are you going to get like a shelled kind of Coots? You know what I mean? So I'd probably leave him probably on IR for right now. And that's kind of the unfortunate thing with all this too, with the Flyers, because if you look at cap friendly, right? I mean, they're, you have 4 million used, and this still isn't even updated. This says they're at 50 contract. They're not. They're at 48 because they still have Fedotov. They still have Fedotov on here, I believe. Yeah, anyway, I mean, they still have Fedotov on here, and they also still have John Rundle. Avon, he's in the OHL, so that would get taken off, and Fedotov, that would get taken off, so that's not right. So a lot of this would be different. Again, the unfortunate thing of this is that you still have Ellis. Who knows really what's happening with Ellis? You have Patrick Brown, who is 1 year, 750,000 left. He's still hurt, and he's on LTIR. That's LTIR. For IR, it's Couturier and Van Riemsdyk because of the month for JVR, so they ended up just putting him on IR. But again, you still have Anisimov on a PTO, and you can keep a guy on a PTO until the deadline. It happened before. Bill actually told me this story once. I think it was, don't quote me on it, but it might have been Calvin DeHaan or somebody who was with the Islanders for a while. And I don't think it was DeHaan because he played. I think is still playing. I don't know. But basically, the Flyers stayed on the PTO for the whole year, and then once the trade deadline came around, they just signed him. So that's basically what happened. So that can happen with Anisimov. I don't know. I mean, the last time I was in the press box, which was last weekend? Yeah, last Sunday. He was pretty much he was still skating the other day, or at least like last week or so, and he again still with the team. So again, we'll see what happens with that. If he ends up actually playing a game this year with the Flyers, I'm not too sure, because again, that's the other thing. Like but we're talking about like who comes in the lineup. You take out Bellows, you take out Risto. I would assume that Risto probably comes back next game, but Bellows, it's like, who are you taking out? Because Frost had a good game. I thought Sedlak had a good game, unless you take him out. I don't see them taking out McEwen. We'll see. Howard Frank, he comes in the chat here, says, Chris, we're fine with special teams. Our 5-on-5 offense needs help. Torts has them fighting, but the talent level isn't great, and it shows. Well, obviously, I mean, I think we all kind of knew that going into this year. The thing is, they're hurt. I mean, you don't have Coots, you don't have Atkinson. That's part of your offense. It's kind of the tough thing. It sucks because I don't want to always go back to injuries. And again, anybody wants to call in, we got 15 people in here. Call 267-939-1216. Again, I've liked how resilient they've played, and that's a good thing. I mean, you want to see that. You want to be able to see that from this team, and you want to be able to see the them coming back into games and being able to get that late goal or tie it, or tie it on the power play, tie the game late, whatever, things like that, and they've been able to do that. So again, in general, I think there's been a lot of good things for this team so far. Obviously not great. There's been a lot of different things that haven't been good. I mean, you're outshot in a lot of your games. Getting a call here from Derek, so let me answer this one here. Hey, what's up, brother? You're on the air.
Hey, I'm not walking this time, so I should sound better.
Probably won't blow up my ears this time either. Go ahead, dude.
Basically, I just came in to comment that I know the team is not supposed to be good, and yet we're winning.
Yeah.
So, problem here. We're not supposed to be good, but we're technically at the moment good. And the only problem I see with this isn't that we're winning games and we won't get Connor Bedard or blah, blah, blah. The real problem that I see here is we're not winning the right way, in the sense of we're not actually being carried by the younger guys who can carry us into the future. We're getting 12 points in 11 games from Kevin Hayes.
Mm-hmm.
Because Kevin Hayes, since he's a 30-year-old who's been in the NHL for 800 years, feels confident to play regardless of who the coach is.
Right.
Whereas a lot of these younger kids like Morgan Frost, who stepped into the NHL 5 minutes ago, are fighting for every second of ice time and are scared to death of making a mistake. And that, regardless of whether they're winning games or losing games, is what I want to see go away.
Right. Yeah. No, I hear you. And I think that's kind of what Bill hinted at, right? I mean, it's more of, you know, you want the guys who are kind of not as, I guess, obviously confidence is a word, but, you know, they're just not as confident in their game. And I think you see that with some guys. I mean, they're making the safe play. I mean, some of those games that Frost was playing, he was just kind of playing safe. And it wasn't just him. You know, Bellows did it. I thought Allison did it a couple of times. Like, it's not, you know, unfortunately, it's becoming an early theme here in the year is that a lot of these guys have just been just not as confident because they're not playing. I guess you could put it as they're not playing probably the way that they usually are used to, like with Allison, right? For example, the lateral play that Torts mentions.
Yeah,
and me and you have talked about this. I still don't know what he was talking about. I think it's more of the kind of like that turnover last night, like that he had that kind of backhand blind up the middle kind of thing. Like that's kind of the stuff he probably wants to eliminate. But no, I agree with you. I mean, I think a lot of what it is you want, you know, your younger guys who are going to play a lot more. And, you know, you're going to have a lot of them, whether it's Provorov or, you know, all the younger players. And yes, Provorov is a younger player. You know, when you have guys like that, you know, you're going to want those guys to have confidence. And, you know, it's weird. Like he's mentioned before, some guys, you know, he doesn't want them to lose confidence to make a play when some guys, that's been happening constantly. So I don't know. I mean, it's unfortunate. Go ahead.
To just add on a little bit here.
Mm-hmm.
And we spent a lot of time over the summer talking about accountability and holding all these players accountable. And generally, that's a good idea. The one problem I see right is we're holding players accountable in the wrong way. We're holding young players accountable for making mistakes. As in, if you make a mistake, I'm coming after you. I'm coming after your ice time, that sort of thing. Instead of being like, I'm holding you accountable for effort.
Mm-hmm.
I'm making sure you give me 110%. If you do and you make a mistake along the way, I can live with that.
Right.
That we need to get more towards that, like Don Granato and Rasmus Dahlin, and less towards Wade Allison decided to throw a blind backhand into the middle of the ice, and so I'm pulling him as if we're the Tampa Bay Lightning and every single win matters.
Right. No, I hear you. And that's the thing, right? I mean, I think a lot of it is trying to get the guys to play the right way and don't do that consistently, but try not to hurt the confidence. And I think that I see, and that's kind of a little bit of a different conversation, but I think that's a little harder to do, right? Because it's two things. It's not just, you know, don't affect the confidence, because you have to play a certain way, right, to play in the NHL. And obviously all the guys know that. And, you know, us on the outside, we understand that too. But again, like Frost, to put him on a line with Delorier and played last night, most of that game with Legzinski, it was kind of switched up a little bit. It was kind of mixed at times when he's out there for the goal with Allison and McEwen. It was like a mixed change, but even still, you know, you want to see certain guys kind of take that advantage, you know, when they get put in that kind of crappy situation. And I felt like that's what Frost did. You know, he went out and he took charge of that. And again, I thought that was his best game of the season so far. I mean, obviously outside of the game where he had the 2 goals in the opener, but for sure.
We really went just as far as like underlying results in the process. That game for Frost might have even been better the New Jersey game, because there were points that game for us for his line, and it would differ whoever was on his line sometimes, but his line would just take over the game.
Yeah.
And the Flyers weren't doing a whole lot of taking over the game outside of him and outside of like connecting shifts.
Yeah, right. And that top line, exactly. But yeah, no, for sure, I agree with you. I think a lot of it is just trying to kind of keep that confidence at a even level so that everybody can kind of mix in at the same time. But wins will help that, and certain shifts will help that. And moments where I think for Frost and having a game like he did, where generated some scoring chances and a couple takeaways. I don't think all of them were credited. He played more minutes than usual. Played 10 minutes, in that game, and he definitely needs more if you want to see more of an offensive production. And like me and Bill kind of hinted on with the second power play. But for sure, I think there's been a lot of good things from Frost.
Yeah, the hope is that's a springboard, almost like what we see with Tippett. And I mean, Tippett, I went back and I watched Tippett last year, and honestly, I think him this year and him last year are almost the same in a sense, but that's good.
Right.
Because Tippett is playing with the same confidence he had last year. That's kind of the point we have to get Frost to, because with Frost, it's not like we need to teach him new skills.
Right.
He's got them there. He's just got to learn how to apply them at the NHL level. And he's only going to be able to do that through confidence and experience.
And ice time too.
and ice time, and actually being on the NHL ice in order to perform the things.
Right, for sure. Yeah, dude, again, thanks so much for calling in. Always good talking with you. I'll be making sure to look at your next piece coming out soon.
Thank you.
All right, man. See ya.
See ya.
Always good talking to Derek. Again, thanks Derek for calling in. Thanks everybody. Good show today. Did a lot of good things. Always good talking to Bill. And one quick thing before I go. The Flyers Warriors this week, on Thursday, they are doing, let me pull it up in my notes here so I don't screw this up for the read. But the Warriors are doing here it is. It is a basically like a watch party for the Flyers game on Thursday. They're doing it at the Barstool Bar on Sampson Street, which is 1213 Sampson Street, Philadelphia, PA, which is 19107. That's the address. Portion of the sales will be donated to the Warriors for Veterans Day. There's gonna be raffles and stuff, a bunch of merchandise and all that stuff as well. Yeah, again, check that out. Go support the Warriors. They're great. They do a lot of good things. They were just in Michigan. Couple tough losses with some of the groups, but a couple tiers did win. Tier 4 did win. Tier 2 was the runner-up for the Warriors. So again, always support them. They're great. They've helped me out with a lot of good things, and I've obviously been covering them for a while as well. But again, check out the Warriors if you're not doing anything on Thursday during the watch party for the Flyers game when they take us on Columbus that night. Thanks everybody so much for tuning in. Again, thank you, Bill, for coming back on. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you all again next week, and stay tuned for the blog. Gonna have posts from there. Obviously the game recap videos on YouTube, all that different stuff. Thank you guys so much for watching this week, and I'll talk to you all again soon.